Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Mr. Howlietzer. I've got 5 Scottish myths for you today. I'll still be writing some of my fiction, specifically the Loner series, but I figured I'd get back to Scottish folklore and mythology for a bit. The first story that I have is called The Young King of Easaidh Ruadh. Forgive me for any pronunciation issues, and also, while reading these, it's definitely written in a way that is, honestly, hard to really read, and I assure you, this is just kind of the way they're written. So, I'm doing my best to read them as they were written long ago, and, well, like I said, pronunciation is a little bit difficult, so let's get started. The young king of Easaidh Ruadh, after he got the airship to himself, was as much merrymaking, looking out what would suit him and what would come into his humor. There was a Gruagach near his dwelling, who was called Cailliach Mhor Chlibhrich, the brown, curly, long-haired one. He thought to himself that he would go to play a game with him. He went to the Sanntraigh, or soothsayer, and he said to him, "I am made up that I will go to game with the Cailliach Mhor Chlibhrich." "Aha," said the Sanntraigh. "Art thou such a man? Art thou so insolent that thou art going to play a game against the Cailliach Mhor Chlibhrich? For my advice to thee, to change thy nature and not go there." "I won't do that," said he. "For my advice to thee, if thou shouldest win of the Cailliach Mhor Chlibhrich, to get the cropped, rough-skinned maid that is behind the door for the worth of thy gaming, and many a turn will he put off before thou gettest her." He lay down that night, and if it was early that the day came, 'twas earlier than that the king arose to hold gaming against the Gruagach. He reached the Gruagach, he blessed the Gruagach, and the Gruagach blessed him. Said the Gruagach to him, "O young king of Easaidh Ruadh, what brought thee to me today? Wilt thou game with me?" They began, and they played the game. The king won. "Lift the stake of thy gaming, so that I may get leave to be moving." "The stake of my gaming is to give me the cropped, rough-skinned girl thou hast behind the door. Many a fair woman have I within besides her," said the Gruagach. "I will take none but that one. Blessing to thee, and cursing to thy teacher of learning." They went to the house of the Gruagach, and the Gruagach set in order 20 young girls. "Lift now thy choice from amongst these." One was coming out after another, and every one that would come out, she would say, "I am she. Art thou not silly that art not taking me with thee?" But the Sanntraigh had asked him to take none but the last one that would come out. When the last one came out, he said, "This is mine." He went with her, and when they were a bit from the house, her form altered, and she is the loveliest woman that was on earth. The king was going home full of joy at getting such a charming woman. He reached the house, and he went to rest. If it was early that the day arose, it was earlier than that the king arose to go to game with the Gruagach. "I must absolutely go to game against the Gruagach today," he said to his wife. "Oh," said she, "that's my father, and if thou goest to game with him, take nothing for the stake of thy play, but the dun shaggy filly that has the stick saddle on her." The king went to encounter the Gruagach, and surely the blessing of the two to each other was not beyond what it was before. "Yes," said the Gruagach. "How did thy bride please thee yesterday?" "She pleased fully." "Hast thou come to game with me today?" "I came." They began at the gaming, and the king won from the Gruagach on that day. "Lift the stake of thy gaming, and be sharp about it." "The stake of my gaming is the Dunshag filly, on which is the stick saddle." They went away together. They reached the Dunshaggy filly. He took her out from the stable, and the king put his leg over her, and she was the swift heroine. He went home. His wife had her hands spread before him, and they were cheery together that night. "I would rather myself," said his wife, "that thou shouldn't not go to game with the Gruagach any more, or if he wins, he will put trouble on thy head." "I won't do that," he said. "I will go to play with him today." He went to play with the Gruagach. When he arrived, he thought the Gruagach was seized with joy. "Hast thou come?" he said. "I came." They played the game, and as a cursed victory for the king, the Gruagach won that day. "Lift the stake of thy game," said the young king of Easaidh Ruadh, "and it be not heavy on me, for I cannot stand to it. The stake of my play is," said he, "that I lay it as crosses and as spells on thee, and as the defect of the year, that the cropped rough-skinned creature, more uncouth and unworthy than thou thyself, should take thy head and thy neck and thy life's look off, if thou dost not get for me the glaive of light of the king of the oak windows." The king went home, heavily, poorly, gloomily. The young queen came meeting him, and she said to him, "Mhor Ruadh, my pity, there is nothing with thee tonight." Her face and her splendor gave some pleasure to the king when he looked on her, but when he sat on a chair to draw her towards him, his heart was so heavy that the chair broke under him. "What ails thee, or what shall ail thee, that thou mightest not tell it to me?" said the queen. The king told how it happened. "Ha," said she, "what shouldst thou mind, and that thou hast the best wife in Erin, and the second best horse in Erin. If thou takest my advice, thou wilt come well out of all these things yet. If it was early that the day came, it was earlier than that the queen arose, and she set order in everything, for the king was about to go on his journey. She set in order the Dunshaggy filly, on which was the stick saddle, and though he saw it as wood, it was full of sparkling with gold and silver. He got on it. The queen kissed him, and she wished him victory of battlefields. "I need not be telling thee anything. Take thou the advice of thine own she-comrade, the filly, and she will tell thee that thou shouldest do." He set out on his journey, and it was not dreary to be on the dun steed. She would catch the swift march wind that would be before, and the swift march wind would not catch her. They came at the mouth of dusk and lateness to the court and castle of the king of the oak windows. Said the Dunshaggy filly to him, "We are at the end of the journey, and we have not to go any further. Take my advice, and I will take thee where the sword of light of the king of the oak windows is, and if it comes with thee without scrape or creak, it is a good mark on our journey. The king is now at his dinner, and the sword of light is in his chamber. There is a knob on its end, and when thou catchest the sword, draw it softly out of the window case." He came to the window where the sword was. He caught the sword, and it came with him softly till it was at its point, and then it gave a sort of screed. "We will now be going," said the filly. "It is no stopping time for us. I know the king has felt us taking the sword out." He kept his sword in his hand, and they went away. And when they were a bit forward, the filly said, "We will stop now, and look thou whom thou seest behind thee." "I see," said he, "a swarm of brown horses coming madly." "We are swifter ourselves than these yet," said the filly. They went, and when they were at a good distance forward, "Look now," said she, "whom seest thou coming?" "I see a swarm of black horses, and one white-faced black horse, and he is coming in madness, and a man on him. That is the best horse in Erin. It is my brother, and he got 3 months more nursing than I, and he will come past me with a whir, and try to, if thou wilt be so ready, that when he comes past me, thou wilt take the head off the man who is on him. For the time of passing he will look at thee, and there is no sword in his court wilt take off his head, but the very sword that is in thy hand." When this man was going past, he gave his head a turn to look at him. He drew the sword, and he took his head off, and the shaggy dun filly caught it in her mouth. "Which was the king of the oak windows? Leap on the black horse," said she, "and leave the carcass there, and be going home as fast as he will take thee home, and I will be coming as best as I may after thee." He leapt on the black horse, and more! He was the swift hero, and they reached the house long before day. The queen was without rest till he arrived. They raised music, and they laid down woe. On the morrow he said, "I am obliged to go to see the Gruagach today, to try if my spells will be loose. Mind that it is not as usual. The Gruagach will meet thee. He will meet thee furiously, wildly, and he will say to thee, 'Didst thou get the sword?' And say thou that thou hast got it. He will say, 'How didst thou get it?' And thou shalt say, 'If it were not the knob that was on its end, I had not got it.' He will ask thee again, 'How didst thou get the sword?' And thou wilt say, 'If it were not the knob that was on the end, I had not got it.' Then he will give himself a lift to look what knob is on the sword, and thou wilt see a mole on the right side of his neck, and stab the point of the sword into the mole. And if thou dost not hit the mole, thou and I are done. His brother was the king of the oak windows, and he knows that till the other had lost his life, he would not part with the sword. The death of the two is in the sword, but there is no other sword that will touch them but it." The queen kissed him, and she called on Victory of Battlefields to be with him, and he went away. The Gruagach met him in the very same place where he was before. "Didst thou get the sword?" "I got the sword." "How didst thou get the sword?" "If it were not the knob that was on its end, I had not got it," said he. "Let me see the sword." "It was not laid on me to let thee see it." "How didst thou get the sword?" "If it were not the knob that was on the end, I got it not." The Gruagach gave his head a lift to look at the sword. He saw the mole. He was sharp and quick, and he thrust the sword into the mole, and the Gruagach fell down dead. He returned home, and when he returned home, he found his set of keepers and watchers tied back to back, without wife or horse or sweetheart of his, but was taken away. When he loosed them, they said to him, "A great giant came and took away thy wife and thy 2 horses. Sleep will not come on mine eyes, nor rest on mine head, till I get my wife and 2 horses back. And saying this, he went on his journey. He took the side that the track of the horses was, and he followed them diligently. The dusk and lateness were coming on him, and no stop did he make until he reached the side of the green wood. He saw where there was the forming of the sight of a fire, and he thought that he would put the fire upon it, and thus he would put the night past there. He was not long here at the fire when Husang of the green wood came on him. He blessed the dog, and the dog blessed him. "Oof, oof," said the dog. "Bad was the plight of thy wife and thy 2 horses here last night with the big giant. It is that which has set me so pained and pitiful on the track tonight. But there is no help for it. O king," said the dog, "thou must not be without meat." The dog went into the wood. He brought out creatures, and they made them meat contentedly. "I rather think myself," said the king, "that I may turn home, that I cannot go near that giant." "Don't do that," said the dog. "There's no fear of thee, king. Thy matter will grow with thee. Thou must not hear without sleeping. Fear will not let me sleep without a warranty. Sleep thou," said the dog, "and I will warrant thee." The king let himself down, stretched out at the side of the fire, and he slept. When the watch broke, and the dog said to him, "Rise up, king, till thou gettest a morsel of meat that will strengthen thee, till thou wilt be going on thy journey. Now," said the dog, "if hardship or difficulty comes on thee, ask my aid, and I will be with thee in an instant." They left a blessing with each other, and they went away. In the time of dusk and lateness, he came to a great precipice of rock, and there was the forming of the sight of the fire. He thought he would gather dry fuel, and that he would set on fire. He began to warm himself, and he was not long thus when the hoary hawk of the grey rock came on him. "Oof, oof," said she, "bad was the plight of thy wife and thy 2 horses last night with the big giant." "There is no help for it," said he. I have got much of their trouble and little of their benefit myself." "Catch courage," said she, Thou wilt get something of their benefit yet. Thou must not be without meat here," she said. "There is no contrivance for getting meat," said he. "We will not be long getting meat," said the falcon. She went, and she was not long when she came with 3 ducks and 8 blackcocks in her mouth. They set their meat in order, and they took it. "Thou must not be without sleep," said the falcon. How shall I sleep without a warranty over me, to keep me from anyone evil that is here? Sleep thou, king, and I will warrant thee." He let himself down, stretched out, and he slept. In the morning the falcon set him on foot. Hardship or difficulty that comes on thee, mind at any time that thou wilt get my help. He went swiftly, sturdily. The night was coming, and the little birds of the forest of the branching bushy trees were talking about the briar roots and the twig tops, and it was stillness, not peace for him, till he came to the side of a great river that was there. And at the bank of the river there was the forming of the sight of a fire. The king blew a heavy little spark of fire. He was not long here when there came as company for him the brown otter of the river. "Ooch, ooch," said the otter. "Bad was the plight of thy wife and thy 2 horses last night with the giant. There is no help for it. I got much of their trouble and a little of their benefit. Catch courage. Before midday tomorrow thou wilt see thy wife, "O king, thou must not be without meat," said the otter. "How is meat to be got here?" said the king. The otter went through the river, and she came to 3 salmon with her that were splendid. They made meat, and they took it. Said the otter to the king, "Thou must sleep." "How can I sleep without any warranty over me? Sleep thou, and I will warrant thee." The king slept. In the morning the otter said to him, "Thou wilt be this night in presence of thy wife." He left blessing with the otter. "Now," said the otter, "if difficulty be on thee, ask my aid, and thou shalt get it." The king went till he reached a rock, and he looked down into the chasm that was in the rock. And at the bottom he saw his wife and his 2 horses, and he did not know how he should get them. He went around till he came to the foot of the rock, and there was a fine road for going in. He went in, and if he went, it was then she began crying. "Hood, Hood," he said, "this is bad. If thou art crying now, when I myself have got so much trouble coming about thee." "Ooh," said the horses, "set him in front of us, and there is no fear for him till we leave this." She made meat for him, and she set him to rice. And when they were a while together, she put him in front of the horses. When the giant came, he said, "The smell of the stranger is within." Says she, "My treasure, my joy, and my cattle, there is nothing but smell of the litter of horses." At the end of a while he went to give meat to the horses, and the horses began and they all but killed him, and he hardly crawled from them. "Dear thing," said she, "they are like to kill thee. If I myself had my soul to keep, it's long since they had killed me." Said he, "Where, dear, is thy soul? By the books I will take care of it. It is," said he, "in the bannock stone." When he went on the morrow, she set the bannock stone in order exceedingly. In that time of dusk and lateness, the giant came home. She set her man in front of the horses, and the giant went to give the horses meat, and they mangled him more and more. "What made thee set the bannock stone in order like that?" said he. "Because thy soul is in it. I perceive that if thou didst know where my soul is, thou wouldst give it much respect." "I would give that," said she. "If it is not here," said he, "my soul is. It is in the threshold." She set in order the threshold finally on the morrow. When the giant returned, he went to give meat to the horses, and the horses mangled him more and more. "What brought thee to set the threshold in order like that?" "Because thy soul is in it. I perceive if thou knewest where my soul is, that thou wouldst take care of it." "I would take care of that," said she. "It is not where that thy soul is," said he. "There is a great flagstone under the threshold. There is a wether under the flag. There is a duck in the wether's belly, and an egg in the belly of the duck, and it is in the egg that my soul is." When the giant went away on the morrow's day, they raised the flagstone, out went the wether. "If I had the slim dog of the greenwood, he would not be long bringing the wether to me." The slim dog of the greenwood came with the wether in his mouth. When they opened the wether, out of the duck on the wing with the other ducks. "If I had the hoary hawk of the grey rock, she would not be long bringing me the duck." The hoary hawk of the grey rock came with the duck in her mouth. When they split the duck to take the egg from her belly, out went the egg into the depths of the ocean. "If I had the brown otter of the river, he would not be long bringing me the egg." The brown otter came and the egg in her mouth. And the queen caught the egg, and she crushed it between her two hands. The giant was coming in the lateness, and when she crushed the egg, he fell down dead, and he was never yet moved out of that. They took with them a great deal of his gold and silver. They passed a cheery night with the brown otter of the river, the night with the hoary falcon of the grey rock, and a night with the slim dog of the greenwood. They came home, and they set in order a Chlibhrich, a hearty hero's feast, and they were lucky and well pleased after that. Alright, the next story I've got is called The Girl and the Dead Man. There was before now a poor woman, and she had a legion of daughters. Said the eldest one of them to her mother, I had better go myself and seek for fortune. I had better, said her mother, bake a bannock for thee. When the bannock was ready, her mother said to her, Whether wouldst thou like best the bit and my blessing, or the big bit and my curse? I would rather, said she, the big bit and thy curse. She went away, and when the night was wreathing around her, she sat at the foot of the wall to eat the bannock. There gathered the Sanntraigh Cailliach and her 12 puppies, the little birds of the air about her, for a part of the bannock. Wilt thou give us a part of the bannock? Said they. I won't give it, you ugly brutes. I have not much for myself. My curse will be thine, and the curse of my 12 birds, and thy mother's curse is the worst of all. She rose, and she went away, and she had not half enough with the bit of the bannock. She saw the little house a long way from her, and if a long way from her, she was not long reaching it. She struck in the door. Who's there? A good maid seeking a master. We want that, said they, and she got in. She had now a peck of gold and a peak of silver to get, and she was to be awake every night to watch a dead man, brother of the housewife, who was under spells. She had besides of nuts as she broke, of needles as she lost, of thimbles as she pierced, of thread as she used, of candles as she burned, a bed of green silk over her, a bed of green silk under her, sleeping by day and watching by night. The first night when she was watching, she fell asleep. The mistress came in. She struck the magic club on her. She fell down dead, and she threw her out of the back of the midden. Said the middle one to the mother, I had better go seek fortune and follow my sister. Her mother baked her a bannock, and she chose the big half and her mother's curse, as her elder sister did. And it happened to her as it happened to her sister. Said the youngest one to her mother, I had better go myself to seek fortune too, and follow my sisters. I had better bake a bannock, said her mother. Whether wouldst thou rather the little bit and my blessing, or the big bit and my curse? I would rather the little bit and your blessing. She went, and the night was wreathing around her, and she sat at the foot of the wall to eat the bannock. There gathered the Sanntraigh Cailliach and the 12 puppies, and the little birds of the air about her. Wilt thou give us some of that? I will give you, pretty creatures, if you will keep me company. She gave them some of the bannock. They ate, and they had plenty, and she had enough. They clapped their wings about her till she was snug with the warmth. She went, she saw a little house along the way, and if it was a long way from her, she was not long reaching it. She struck in the door. Who's there? A good maid seeking a master. We have need of that. The wages she had were a peck of gold and a peck of silver, of nuts as she broke, of needles as she lost, of thimbles as she pierced, of thread as she used, of candles as she burned, a bed of the green silk over her, a bed of green silk under her. She sat to watch the dead man, and she was sewing. On the middle of the night he rose up, and screwed up a grin. If thou dost not lie down properly, I will give thee one leathering with a stick. He lay down. At the end of a while, he rose on one elbow and screwed up a grin. And the third time he rose and screwed up a grin. When he rose the third time, she struck him a launder of the stick. And the stick stuck to the dead man, and the hand stuck to the stick, and out they were. They went forward till they were going through a wood. When it was low for her, it was high for him, and when it was high for him, it was low for her. The nuts were knocking their eyes out, and the sloes taking their ears off, till they got through the wood. After going through the wood, they returned home. She got a peck of gold and a peck of silver, and a vessel of cordial. She rubbed the vessel of cordial to her two sisters, and brought them alive. They returned home. They left me sitting here, and if they were well, 'tis well, and if they were not, let them be. The next story is called the Sanntraigh. There was a herd's wife in the island of Sanntraigh, and she had a kettle. A woman of peace would come every day to seek the kettle. She would not say a word when she came, but she would catch hold of the kettle. When she would catch the kettle, the woman of the house would say, "A smith is able to make, hold iron hot with coal. The dew of a kettle is bones, and to bring it back again whole." The woman of peace would come back every day with the kettle, and the flesh and bones in it. On a day that was there, the housewife was forgoing over the Faerie to Cailliach Mhor, and she said to her man, "If thou wilt say to the woman of peace, as I say, I will go to Cailliach Castle." "Ooh, I will say it. Surely it's I that will say it." He was spinning a heather rope to be set on the house. He saw a woman coming and a shadow from her feet, and he took fear of her. He shut the door. He stopped his work. When she came to the door, she did not find the door open, and he did not open it for her. She went above a bowl that was in the house. The kettle gave 2 jumps, and at the third leap, it went out at the ridge of the house. The night came, and the kettle came not. The wife came back over the Faerie, and she did not see a bit of the kettle within. And she asked, "Where was the kettle?" "Well then, I don't care where it is," said the man. "I never took such a fright as I took at it. I shut the door, and she did not come any more with it." "Good-for-nothing wretch, what didst thou do? There are 2 that will be ill off, thyself and I. She will come tomorrow with it." "She will not come." She hastened herself, and she went away. She reached the knoll, and there was no man within. It was after dinner, and they were out in the mouth of the night. She went in. She saw the kettle, and she lifted it with her. It was heavy for her, with the remnants that they left in it. When the old carle that was within saw her going out, he said, silent wife, that came on us from the land of chase. Thou man on the surface of the bruth, loose the black and slip the fierce." The 2 dogs were let loose, and she was not long away when she heard the clatter of the dogs coming. She kept the remnant that was in the kettle, so that if she could get it with her, well, and if the dogs could come, that she might throw it at them. She perceived the dogs coming. She put her hand in the kettle. She took the board out of it, and she threw it at them, a quarter of what was in it. They noticed it was there for a while. She perceived them again, and she threw another piece at them when they closed upon her. She went away walking as well as she might. She came near the farm. She threw the mouth of the pot downwards, and there she left all that was left in it. The dogs of the town struck up a barking when they saw the dogs of peace stopping. The woman of peace never came more to seek the kettle. The next story is Cailliach Mhor Chlibhrich. This celebrated witch was accursed of having enchanted the deer of the Ray forest, so that they avoided pursuit. Lord Ray was exceedingly angry, but at a loss how to remedy the evil. His man, William, the same who braved the witch and sat down in her hut, promised to find out if this was the case. He watched her for a whole night, and by some counter enchantments managed to be present when in the early morning she was busy milking the hinds. They were standing all about the door of the hut, till one of them ate a hank of blue worsted hanging from a nail in it. The witch struck the animal and said, "The spell is off you, and Lord Ray's bullet will be your death today." William repeated this to his master to confirm the tale of his having passed the night in the hut of the great hag, which no one would believe, and the event justified it, for a fine yellow hind was killed that day, and the hank of a blue yarn was found in his stomach. This is the last story of this video. It's called The Smith and the Faeries. Years ago, there lived in Crossbrig a smith of the name of MacAaron. This man had an only child, a boy of about 13 or 14 years old, cheerful, strong, and healthy. All of a sudden, he fell ill, took to his bed, and moped whole days away. No one could tell what was the matter with him. The boy himself could not, or would not, tell how he felt. He was wasting away fast, getting thin, old, and yellow, and his father and all his friends were afraid that he would die. At last, one day, after the boy had been lying in this condition for a long time, getting neither better nor worse, always confined to bed, but with an extraordinary appetite, one day, while sadly revolving these things, and standing idly at his forge, with no heart to work, the smith was agreeably surprised to see an old man, well known to him for his sagacity and knowledge of out-of-the-way things, walk into his workshop. Forthwith he told him the occurrence which had clouded his life. The old man looked grave as he listened, and after sitting a long time pondering over all that he had heard, gave his opinion thus: "It is not your son you have got. The boy has been carried away by the Doin Sith, and they have left a Chlibhrich in his place. Alas! And what then am I to do?" said the smith. "How am I to see my own son again?" "I will tell you how," answered the old man. "But first, to make sure that it is not your own son you have got, take as many empty eggshells as you can, go with them into the room, spread them out carefully before his sight, then proceed to draw water with them, carrying them two and two in your hands, as if they were a great weight, and arrange them full, with every sort of earnestness, round the fire." The smith accordingly gathered as many broken eggshells as he could, went into the room, and proceeded to carry out all his instructions. He had not been long at work before there arose from the bed a shout of laughter, and the voice of the seemingly sick boy exclaimed, "I am now 800 years of age, and I have never seen the like of that before." The smith returned and told the old man. "Well now," said the sage to him, "did I not tell you that this was not your son you had? Your son is in Brochele, in the dig there, that is, a round green hill frequented by fairies. Get rid as soon as possible of this intruder, and I think I may promise you your son. You must light a very large and bright fire before the bed on which this stranger is lying. He will ask you, what is the use of such a fire as that? After him at once, you will see that presently, and then seize him, and throw him into the middle of it. If it is your son you have got, he will call out to save him. But if it is not, this thing will fly through the roof." The smith again followed the old man's advice, kindled a large fire, answered the question put to him as he had been directed to do, and seizing the child, flung him in without hesitation. The Chlibhrich gave an awful yell, and sprung through the roof, where a hole was left to let the smoke out. On a certain night, the old man told him the green round hill where the fairies kept the boy would be open. And on that night, the smith, having provided himself with a Bible, a dirk, and a crowning cock, was to proceed to the hill. He would hear singing and dancing and much merriment going on, but he was to advance boldly. The Bible he carried would be a certain safeguard to him against any danger from the fairies. On entering the hill, he was to stick the dirk in the threshold to prevent the hill from closing upon him. And then, continued the old man, on entering you will see a spacious apartment before you, beautifully clean, and there, standing far within, working at a forge, you will also see your own son. When you are questioned, say you come to seek him, and will not go without him." Not long after this, the time came round, and the smith sallied forth, prepared as instructed. Sure enough, as he approached the hill, there was a light where the light was seldom seen before. Soon after, a sound of piping, dancing, and joyous merriment reached the anxious father on the night wind. Overcoming every impulse of fear, the smith approached the threshold steadily, stuck the dirk into it as directed, and entered. Protected by the Bible he carried on his breast, the fairies could not touch him, but they asked him, with a good deal of displeasure, what he wanted there. He answered, "I want my son, whom I see down there, and I will not go without him." Upon hearing this, the whole company before him gave a loud laugh, which wakened up the cock he carried dozing in his arms, who at once leapt upon his shoulders, and clapped its wings lustfully, and crowned loud and long. The fairies, incensed, seized the smith and his son, and throwing them out of the hill, flung the dirk after them, and in an instant all was dark. For a year and a day the boy never did a turn of work, and hardly ever spoke a word. But at last, one day, sitting by his father and watching him finishing a sword he was making for some chief, and which he was very particular about, he suddenly exclaimed, "That is not the way to do it." And taking the tools from his father's hand, he set to work himself in his place, and soon fashioned a sword, the like of which was never seen in the country before. From that day the young man wrought constantly with his father, and became the inventor of a peculiar fine and well-tempered weapon, the making of which kept the two smiths, father and son, in constant employment, spread their fame far and wide, and gave them the means to abundance, as they before had the disposition to live content with all the world and very happily with one another. I have to say that last story was definitely my favorite. It seemed to be a little bit more modern in language, as the other ones were a little bit hard to read and get through just due to the wording in a lot of sections. Um, so, if you liked what you heard today, let me know which story you thought was the best in the comments. Um, Give me a like, subscribe. Let me know what you think. I'm going to try to do more stories like this. I'm also going to continue to share my written work. I've got the first chapter of Loner Autumn on here that I released about a week ago. So go ahead and take a look at that. Um, Other than that, I've got 2 books on Amazon for purchase. One is The Mothman Reborn. It's a comic book about a boy and his encounter with the Mothman. And then my second book is How to Make a Monster, the Slenderfoot story, which is about a young girl in Siberia who was genetically engineered by Russian scientists to be the ultimate weapon. So check those out on Amazon. Also, How to Make a Monster is on Audible as an audiobook. So if you'd rather listen to it, I've had my friends listen to it and buy it. They really enjoy it. So go ahead and give that a shot. Thanks for your support. God bless, and have a good day.